Right, welcome. Good afternoon. For some people, good morning. Welcome to today's APSN African PhD Scholars session on AI in higher education. We want to look at the opportunities, challenges, and the road ahead. And it's amazing being here with colleagues, people about to do their PhD, people already doing their PhD, and to have these conversations. So thank you for participants that are joining from different countries and different disciplines. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. So the African PhD Scholars Network is created for us to provide space for knowledge exchange, for collaboration and community. And this is part of what we do. We have master classes, we have conversations, we have writing sessions where people gather. If the PhD journey can be lonely, but we also target those outside the PhD. So three strands: doing a PhD, about to do a PhD, and if you have finished. So it's a network that aims to, link, especially those of African descent, together to forge a better community. And so we know that the conversation surrounding artificial intelligence is here to stay. It's no longer just the distant ideas, it's part of our classrooms. As lecturers, most of us use it. As researchers, we encounter it. So we want to have a deeper understanding from our colleagues and how it is being used, how it's been utilized. And so we have two excellent speakers with us today who will be talking, sharing stories, sharing ideas on artificial intelligence. I have Dr. Motilola Akinfemisoye-Adejare. Thank you for joining us all the way from the University of Calgary. And she brings her expertise from African studies and academic practice. So welcome. We have Dr. Nenadi Adamu, who also works here in the UK at the University of Bedfordshire. And she also brings expertise in the area of leadership, and we'll be talking about some of these today. So over the next hour plus, we'll not just explore what AI is, but what it means for academics, researchers, and students in the UK and also in Africa. All right. So the main takeaways that I want, and I'll bring our speakers on screen. The main takeaways that I want us to pay attention to is understanding AI, teaching and learning, research, and then the risks. So we'll go through these three components: understanding it, what it is, what it's not, and then we'll go into conversations about a risk and ethics. All right. So welcome again. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for coming to our talk today. And I will add our speakers on the screen. All right, so thank you, Dr. Motilola, Dr. Nenadi, for agreeing to come with us today. So let's just kick this off because there's a lot of questions. Now, before we do this, I want to make sure that everybody that has come on here. So I have a question, and for some reason, my Mentimeter just did not work this morning. But I do have a question that I would like everyone to participate in. Now, what excites you or worries you most about artificial intelligence in higher education? So you could put it in the chat and we'll start from there. What excites you or worries you the most about AI in higher education? I'd like to hear the thoughts, the questions, because when we did send out the form, people did put in some thoughts, so that's interesting. So please put it in the chat so that we can kick this off, and I will just mute. All right, so thank you. We want to hear your thoughts. It excites you, worries you most about AI in higher education. Okay, so we do have a few coming through. Erosion of critical thinking, that's from Sokbe Folua. erosion of critical thinking. Yeah, thank you. Yes, we're going to look at some myths and realities. There's the future of higher education globally and in Africa. Yahya says using generative AI in academic writings ethically. I know that's a huge one, a huge problem where we have these issues, and for tutors as well. We also want to know how can we stop students from the over reliance. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I will start with Dr. Motilola, and please do send your comments as well. Okay, so we have questions, we have opportunities offered by AI, misinformation, AI assisted research. Yes, can help the speed. Okay. I know the part of brainstorming. I love this already. I love this already. Okay, so we'll start with Dr. Motilola and then we'll go to Dr. Nenadi in our conversations today as we begin to explore some of this. So I just want to start with from clear definitions. For both of you as tutors, educators, researchers, what would you say? How would you define, just without, how would you define artificial intelligence, especially with your role?
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever around the world that you are connected. I'm joining you from the beautiful city of Calgary, where it's currently 7:15 a.m. And before I continue my contributions in this very amazing conversation, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Calgary, located in the heart of Southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Beespor, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. And on that note, I would like to say I'm very excited to be here. And thank you, Dr. Bosah, for putting this together. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. It's always fascinating, absolutely wonderful to get to connect with colleagues, but also to speak with future colleagues and to be thinking about these things together, because before it used to be the concern of a few, now it's the concern of all of us because we're living in this world. And as a person of African descent, as a Black woman, and I throw my hands in the class and let my students see, in case they didn't realize, I am fully Black, nothing hidden, and I walk through my Blackness. I think these are very important conversations that we need to have, especially regarding how AI is sort of here to stay in that kind of way. Many of my colleagues have expressed worry, fear, panic almost, and sometimes joy. And it's kind of different levels of reactions when you think about AI. Of course, while we're thinking about definitions, we know like this is artificial intelligence, we know what that looks like, and we know that it's a very important, now at least, part of our lives. You can't shut it out. You cannot kind of close the door and say this isn't allowed here. From the days of Turnitin, Dr. Bosah, you'd remember Coventry 2010, 11. This has been with us. Of course, it wasn't named as such at the time, and perhaps we didn't have that much awareness of what it was going to become. But now we know that it's here to stay. And there's growing research regarding AI itself, especially for, and I mentioned Blackness because there's something about that, especially as Black women. There's current research at the University of Calgary, at least in the law faculty, that's looking at how it's not kind of representing Black women in particular very well, and how that's becoming a problem. How do you recognize people? Facial recognition, for instance. My computer sometimes says it's not me. I mean, I own you, computer, but then I'm trying to do the facial recognition and maybe I've put this way and it was that way. I don't know. Or maybe it's the glasses and all of that and it's changing. Of course, we see that this is permeating many aspects of our lives, and we cannot just wish it away. For those of for colleagues who might not necessarily think that it's a good thing. For me, I think, and this is the way I have approached it, and I love the question that you asked as sort of an icebreaker for us to think about what excites us or worries us when we think about AI. I would say, full disclosure, when I first realized how AI was coming into my classrooms, it was panic. It was what's going on here? Who's going to be in charge? And I suppose it's what we're all called professors. I know it's lecture in the UK. It's what professors grapple with, that who's actually speaking at this point. But I think there are many ways to think about this. And while my area and focus really does not necessarily celebrate technology, because I am no technological determinist. I do not line up with those theorists at all. I think about it more in terms of how the social shaping of AI, and that's what makes me open to it. That's what makes me think about it in a light that it's not what it necessarily is. It's what we do with it and how we do what we do with that. That's very important. I know you've asked for definitions, and you know that I've been on radio, so I could speak from now till tomorrow. And I mustn't keep Dr. Adamu waiting on all her thoughts, because that is very selfish. So I will take a pause at this time. But thank you, Dr. Bosah.
All right, thank you so much. I love how she paid homage to Calgary. That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for, sharing. Thank you. So let's go to Dr. Nenadi.
Okay, hello. I hope you can hear me well. So, thank you, Genevieve, for the honor, as usual, of inviting me to this conversation. And I remember the very first one we had. It was just, I think, post-lockdown, because it was, and I was in the US, and I had to wake up at horrible o'clock to log in, and I had four children, my two, my niece and my nephew. Well, I hate to tell you that I have six today. I have two nieces and two nephews, in addition to my two. They have been warned that mum is in a very important meeting and not to say anything too loud. But just in case, I thought I'll start by giving you a proviso that it is the summer holidays, and it's a blessing to be able to hear children chatter. So well, I wouldn't stop them from talking, but they have just been cautioned, just in case anyone hears any interruptions as I go along. So hello and greetings from sunny Luton. Unfortunately, we are not as glamorous as Calgary. Listening to you, I thought, man, I need to relocate, even if it's just for that line to be able to introduce myself so brilliantly. But yeah, Luton is a blessing. For me personally, what I go by in life is not just where I benefit, but from where I can be a blessing and an impact, make an impact. And there is a lot of opportunity here. So I am from the University of Bedfordshire, been here since my PhD days, and I'm stuck here. Yeah, that's where I currently am, and I do my best here. So I just kind of explore the conversation or the thought around what is AI, and I think I think I'm not trying to dumb it down, but we don't really know who's here on the call, and there may just be someone who has a little bit of misunderstanding of what AI is. So I think it's a good starting point to ask the question, what is it? Because there is a lot of misconception, and not that I'm, shedding dirt on my African people, but I find that there is we are prone to sensationalizing things, right? I remember because I struggled to have babies, so I had infertility, and I remember having to tell my grandmother, who was in her 80s at that time, that I was going to go and do IVF. And so I told her, like, so we're going for IVF, and she says, what is it? In house, I said, "Menene haka." I said, yeah, it's like test tube baby. That was the easiest way I thought I'll explain it to her. Oh my goodness. My grandma was so horrified. And she says to me, "Would your husband agree?" So I said, "What do you mean?" She thought that I was going to be given a sperm created, and, so in her mind, she had, in her 80 something year, and she lived in America, but in her 80 something year old mind, her idea of a test tube baby or IVF was so way off that I had the assumption that she would know. So bringing it back to our conversation, what is AI? AI literally is not just ChatGPT. If you're listening now and you're thinking AI literally is downloading that important app where you can ask anything and it will give you the answer, that's not completely true. AI can even be Google. The little Google search that you do, as long as it is intelligence coming from somewhere else in whatever form, that is artificial intelligence. It's only going from wearing nappies to wearing a suit and tie. If you're a parent, you know from where you have your children learning to read and do the phonics and do all of that, progressing to where you're doing GCSEs and then A levels. That's what we're seeing with AI. I think, in my mind, AI has been around for a very long time. It's just the packaging that's changing, and it's changing with the world. So when I used to teach, you know, in sociological theories to my first year students, I used to tell them, open up your mind because the world is changing. I said, in my days, when I was dating, my now husband would phone the landline and I would speak to him with my father watching the 9 o'clock news, right? And we had the one landline, this is in Africa, in the living room, right? And I had to speak to him standing and facing the cabinet, talking in monosyllables. And I say, the way the life is going when my son's dating maybe his future wife, it would be a hologram. The girl will come in a hologram to his bedroom for them to watch TV together. That's technology and that's life. So AI is anything. Now, I'm saying this so that we can prepare our minds. It's not just ChatGPT. That's what we have now. But the speed in which things are changing means that in the future, we will have mind-blowing ways of knowing and ways of doing that have been created by alternative or outside forces, systems that have been put together to be able to create and generate knowledge. So I hope that kind of clears the mind. I'm very visual and I have very personal examples. So by the end of this, you might know my grandma, my mother, and everything. Those are the examples I draw on. So I just need to apologize in advance.
No, thank you. Thank you. So that's really good that you created that picture of answering the phone. Those days, like, okay, let's not. But also the test tube babies, like, I could imagine what she was thinking, like, was the baby in the test tube? Because you know how small the test tube, like, what's really going on here? But these are some of these conversations that it's great that we're having today. And there are four particular things I want us to bear in mind as we continue with the conversation. And for me, whenever I think of artificial intelligence, I think of it as a way to process information and to process information, to learn from tasks that in ways that make them seem intelligent. So we have the text generation. We have the predictive analysis, we have problem solving, we have, recognizing patterns. And some of these things actually help in a way. But because we're focusing on higher education, I want us to, and both of you mentioned, Dr. Moti mentioned panic, Dr. Nenadi also mentioned the fact that when you talk about it, and you'd almost wonder misconceptions. So I want us to focus just a bit now on some of the misconceptions that you encountered or that we are still encountering in artificial intelligence, because there's some misconceptions among students and academics about AI. I don't know what some schools are doing with the policy. The policy varies from school to school. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you have encountered in learning and teaching, in research and writing with artificial intelligence? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it was fascinating to hear about your grandma, Dr. Adamu. I there's so many things to say. And as you've been speaking, you both I've been casting my mind back to how this is playing out, at least in my context. So at the University of Calgary, we know it's here. I serve on the teaching and learning committee for my faculty, and we've had workshops because we're trying to understand it before it blows out of hand, but we also know that you can't hold air. And that's sort of the way this works, right? Because you really cannot. You want to hold it in a cup? Well, you got to keep trying. Many places and many institutions are really, as you can imagine, trying to find ways of living with the reality that it is now so pervasive. Of course, it has been here ages, long, long before we even put a name to it. It's been here. And as Dr. Nenadi was mentioning earlier, that even the Google search, you think about the days of those search engines that we had. I mean, I also didn't grow up with a smartphone. My first phone, when I tell my students, was a Motorola C200. I remember it so well, like the first, you think about that as your first love, because this was my first liberating moment where I actually owned a cell phone. Wow. That was so intriguing. But from way back, it's been trying to have lots of things being intelligent in the way we know and do things and the way we exist. But of course, when we think about misconceptions and the ways that institutions are dealing with this, at mine, we do not have a policy that's a university-wide policy on AI. And so for us as instructors, we try to find ways of containing this thing that's like air in a cup and trying to pretend that we're in charge of it. Because I know that the first thing my students will do on an assignment is to put that in any AI software that they can think about. But some of the ways that I talk about AI in my classrooms, for instance, is that a calculator does not stop a student from learning mathematics, but you must know what to impute into that calculator for you to get the right sums done. Unfortunately, I didn't know the right things to put into a calculator because mathematics was never my friend. So even if I had 100 calculators, I still was going to get what I was going to get in my quadratic equations because simultaneous equations, why were we always finding X? Where is Y? Why should I look for Y? What's the problem with Y? I was very artsy in my mind. I never really liked those ways of thinking. I preferred us to read a novel, understand the text. Why, for instance, did Okonkwo end up with the way he did? Multiple ways, multiple answers to the same questions has always been the way my mind has worked. And so it's the way we can think about AI as well. While we can think about it as being intrusive in the classroom, we can also think about it as collaborative because in the way that, and I tell my students something, I say, think about a picture, and this is true story. One of the courses I teach is on anti-Black racism. So you hear me straight away going into my Blackness. I am fully aware of all of this Black issues and all that. And I say, think about a picture of people relaxing, young folks relaxing. And let's tell AI to generate a photo of a group of people, black, whatever color, relaxing, and all of that. And you'd see how it places people. I was thinking about this as a conversation, and so I didn't have PowerPoint slides because I thought, it's the point where we did. And I'm like, no, no PowerPoint. We're just going to talk. That picture is one of the most provocative ways of talking about AI and how my students should deal with that. Because what that picture did was to put the black folks behind the couch, standing, gazing at this television program going or whatever they were watching, while the other folks who were not black were sitting relaxed on a couch as you would normally. And I asked the black folks, I said, is this how you watch your TV? Is this how you think about yourself when you're watching? Of course, the answer was a very straightforward no. And it's why it's one way I tell them. So if you think that AI is doing all the thinking for you, well, this is what it's going to provide if you're not also measured in how you're using it. While you can put into a calculator 2 plus 2, you must know that you have a value of 2 that you want to add to 2 for you to punch that in. But to imagine that this calculator somehow mysteriously would know what figures to put in because, well, I don't know mathematics isn't my favorite subject in the world, so I don't know calculator, help me out, is actually missing the point. And that's where the social shaping of this technology comes in. How are we using it? What does that mean for us as scholars, as researchers, as students, as teachers, as whatever? I loved when someone wrote in the question in the chat earlier about their interest in in Black mental health. While my field isn't necessarily in health, I'm collaborating with scholars in the School of Medicine. And I hear this a lot about mental health for Black people, about how does AI function to do that when it cannot even recognize my face accurately? How can it then be the solution to that? So maybe to answer your question, it's very there are many ways to think about this. And these misconceptions are really conversations that are ongoing that we need to continue to have. But what I would argue, I suppose, because we argue a lot, right? What I would argue is that in thinking about AI and its even disruptive impact in our classrooms, I think we need to be measured because what does it know? What that knowledge, now I'm not saying that we cannot go to whatever AI softwares we have and ask a question about something, but how are we taking that? Is that the full story? For me, as an African studies professor, I talk a lot about stories and I talk a lot about the fact that stories, there is no one way of thinking about a story. There are always many sides to the story. And while you might say that 4 plus 2 is 6, so is 3 plus 3, so is 3 times 2, so is 1 plus 5. It just depends on who you are, how you are seeing it, and what exactly you're trying to achieve. And so is 6 plus 0. In fact, actually, my maths is not good, but I suppose I'm going with the numbers today. And so you'd realize that when we think about AI in ways that really put it as what it is, a tool. We think about it more as what we can do with it rather than what it is doing to us and how it is taking over whatever over means and how it is coming to change everything about how we do things. Now, make no mistake about it. And again, as a media studies person, I would keep going to the left and the right. I'm not in any way saying that it's not doing or that it's not supposedly what it thinks it is, but how are we seeing that? What do we say it is? Because it is what we say that it is that it becomes. And that's a very important conversations that we continue to have, at least as in this teaching and learning committee that I'm in, the how do we think about AI and what do we say it is? If we say banish it, throw it out of the window, no AI use in this class, well, we will be the first liars to ourselves. But if we ask our students, I've asked you to write an assignment to reflect on your experience as a person who has understood things in the world. Can AI really tell what you're thinking? Now, if we're dumping our brains into that place, how well is it representing us? And what does that mean for the future of our knowledges and how we produce those kinds of knowledge? I'll take a pause.
No, that's amazing. That is good. Thank you. You talked about the inclusion, but I think one of the strongest things that I like about it is that there is input. So let's not abdicate responsibility to AI and say, oh, it's just it, but it's actually human. We are the ones that prompt, because there's also prompt engineering. But let's pick up, we'll come to the ethical and the bias, especially as a result of the training. But I still want to just follow the thread of learning and teaching. Dr. Nenadi, do you think that AI can make learning more inclusive for us? Do you think that there might be an over reliance on AI tools for learning, and how would that turn up in teaching for us?
Okay, thank you. Just to give a shout out, I didn't realize Professor Les Henry is here. Just a shout out, thank you for coming. Here's a new contact, and I'm hoping that we can do some work together in future. Okay, so I think I wrote down answers to the question around misconceptions. I'm going to have to think on my feet to answer the one you've just thrown in. But what I see, and I'm going to be giving practical examples of how I've seen AI used and misused in teaching from my students. And so again, thinking about the fact that my main group of students that I teach are postgraduate students. So majority are coming for the second degrees from employment. Some of them are already in senior roles and coming into academia. So one of the things that I have seen has been almost a distrust of AI. And I think it maybe might be a trauma reaction where it's like it's actually too good to be true. And I remember in trying to, so I had an experience in the meeting where I was with colleagues from my school, my department, and there was this mad panic because the Turnitin had picked up high scores of AI from students. And it was just because they had put their work through things like Grammarly for the checks, and Turnitin picks all of that as AI. And so we were having this big debate about what to do because these were some very bright students. There was a particular colleague who's uh, star students in nursing who were, finishing with firsts, had put their dissertation through Grammarly. And there was all this whole moral discourse around what to do. And I felt like that was a bit too much because number one, it's a dissertation. If you've worked with a student, you know the work right to the very end. So you can say for sure, because the whole point of it is, has the student done the work? And one of the comments I saw was that there was an erasure, the fear of the erasure of critical thinking. But you can tell, particularly depending on the type of assessment or the piece of work that you're doing, if the student has engaged. I wrote a little paper, a book chapter actually, on why we assess. And I challenged colleagues to think, why are we assessing? What are we assessing? What's the point of assessment? Because if we think about what we want to see at the end as educators, what are we assessing? What's the end point? Are we assessing for knowledge? If that's it, count me out. I don't remember half of the things I teach. We're not trying to get you. And that's because I studied law for my undergrad. There's nowhere you were expected to know all the legislation in your head, no matter what you finish with. And shout out, my best friend's also on the call. She got five prizes when we did law school in Nigeria, in the country. Five. She got five of the prizes in the country that year. She can't remember half the legislation. So we're not being taught to remember, to hold it all in. It's to be able to apply the knowledge that we have. So the panic around what we use it for, how it affects our students, what is it doing, I think comes down to us as educators to be able to be pragmatic in our thinking about how we're embracing, rejecting, how we have a relationship with AI and based on our perception and how we embrace it or whatever, how we relate to it, that transfers on to our students. I think in teaching and learning, I've used AI. So back to my story, what I had to do with my mature students was in a session to tell them to bring out their phones or fire their laptops. We're going to use ChatGPT. And each of them, we were all working on a portfolio of stuff. So there was no way answers would be the same. Each of them had their own area that they were interested in proposing change. We're talking about strategic organizational mental well-being. And so they were all supposed to propose a new initiative for their organizations to improve and enhance the organizational well-being. So they all had their ideas. And I said, put your thoughts in through ChatGPT. That's the one that most of them had and had access to. And they did. And what came up was very basic. And so I was able to say to them, can you see that what this is? It's not really something that will write your assignment and you download and submit if you've got a brain and if you know why you're here. So I made a distinction between postgrad and undergrad because the undergrad, some of them don't really appreciate, particularly year one, how to, what a good assessment looks like. Most times it's like, wow, it's written it for me, right? But these are postgrads who are able to read it and think, this is not actually saying exactly what I want to say, but I can see a structure, or I can see an idea that I can then develop, or then I can then modify, or I can then start as a basis for my conversation. And so I'm of the school of thought that AI is not something to be scared of. And that's what I say to my colleagues. I'm always that one person who laughs it off, who would even actually go through it and see. And the most I've done, in honesty, and I know this is being recorded, but the most I've done is to bring a grade down where I can see that I know the students' work, I know the value, or I know the value that they can add. So whether it's a 50 or it's a 60 or a 80, I know them, I know the value of the work that they can add. And where they have, because we have a university policy, so where it goes again, it goes over 50% or whatever on Turnitin, then we have to raise an issue. The worst I've done is bring a grade down, not completely fail or send to the academic conduct panel, because again, it's about knowledge and about knowing why are we assessing, what exactly are we assessing, and have I achieved what I needed to do at the start of term in the student enough to know that when they go out, they're representing that knowledge on their transcripts, even if it's a 15 credit unit. I know that they can speak to the knowledge that I have imparted, then I'm okay.
Oh, thank you. I like that. The advocates. I know that moral panic is a big thing in universities. Like that question of integrity, that question of, well, somebody said it's in the chat, erosion of critical thinking because it's made it better. Then the question is that really your thinking? Is that really original research? So we keep having that debate. Is this original research, because it enhances in a way. I don't know what, and it's interesting to hear that Calgary doesn't have a policy. I know in the UK we have different policies, but how should universities respond to this? So this case of plagiarism and AI generated work. What are some more thoughts beyond this? Because I have seen students literally copy and paste, and there are times when they'll keep even the dashes, they'll keep, so you're like, okay, sorry, at least show me that you've, you know, they make it, I don't know, but what more? How should we respond? Is it realistic to, and then I've had tutors, fellow colleagues that have copied bulk of students' work and put it through, like not just turn it in other things to detect. And sometimes I feel like that's a lot of work for you. So how do we solve this integrity problem? Do we need new assessment models in a way? I know that Dr. Nenadi is in a way, alluding to that actually we do need new assessment models. But what more can we do? And I like to hear the misconception, but we'll come back to it. So let me ask Dr. Motilola.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bosah. It's so interesting to hear about how this panic is going on elsewhere, especially in a different continent. And I didn't realize that UK universities even had a policy on AI because at mine, to use an AI detector to detect AI is unethical for you as professor. You can't be found to do that. We have a student success associate dean who at the end of term writes a very long email to all of us dear colleagues, and once you see that email you know what it is. I wouldn't mention the colleague's name. And this colleague would go and say, this is the time where we have cases of academic misconduct. We have, you have to report academic misconduct. You have to do this and that and all of that. But also note that if you do not, your suspicion is not good enough. Like you can't just suspect that this is it. You can't just have just an instinct that this has happened and then take that forward as academic misconduct, because the students will come with their own lawyers and it's gonna escalate. And believe it or not, this 20% assessment that you're trying to get will become something else before you even know what that is. So it's a very big thing. And I think I agree with what Dr. Adamu mentioned in thinking about assessment. It's very interesting. Our conference recently at the Taylor Institute, which is the institutes that really is about teaching and learning at the University of Calgary had that conference in April on assessment because assessment is such a big thing in the wake of AI. How are we thinking about the questions that we're asking our students? Why are we asking them those questions? What do we want to achieve? And what's the learning that's taking place? And thank you very much for standing up. I hope you did for that student who's um, supervisor was jittery about their student, doing that because if you have supervised the thesis, you know whether they've written it or not. You can tell. I tell my students that I ask for their name. So I teach mostly undergraduate students, but I also sit here and there on postgraduate committees, on graduate committees here examining masters and PhDs. And I say, I can hear your voice in your writing when I have spoken with you. I think that voice comes from, I don't know, maybe it's the days on radio, Genevieve, you can tell me, but you'd know if it's this editor that has written that news article, and you'd know the ones that were easier to read and the ones that were, oh, I better plan my pauses very well. I didn't read long news bulletins, but I knew that there were some who had very long winding state sentences that you had to really plan your pauses. So I can hear voices and you can feel the person in the assessment. So again, what kind of assessments are we having? Are we having assessments that's just what is this? What does that do in the final analysis if it's not applied? Rather than say, what is what, what, I don't know. People are from different fields here. Rather than asking for the what questions, how about the why and the how, which takes it away from the hands of AI because you'd ask AI that, say, rephrases. And I do that a lot. I ask my students, I say, so how are we going to answer this question? I'll tell a very practical story. So one of the classes I taught in the winter was on diasporic engagement with Africa. And I always, at the end of that class, because it's a 2 hour, 45-minute class, I'll give them time to get into groups and discuss practical ways that we can deal with some of the issues in terms of diasporic engagement with the continent. And I had asked a question regarding the movie industry. I said, what are some of the ways that we can, as members of the diaspora, whether you're black or white, whoever you are, think in ways to contribute back to the continent? AI cannot provide that answer in its entirety. While it might tell you, oh, well, you should sponsor more actors and actresses to do what and what does that mean in practical terms? And that's some of the ways that we can infuse critical thinking back into our assessments because I think it goes back to us. And I know many professors are going to throw that back in my face to say, we're dealing with a lot, we have a life. And, you mentioned you have 6 children in that house. That is a lot of work. I have two, and I was hoping that they would not be awake yet, and they are, and they're downstairs. So if they rush in, I apologize too. But again, you're thinking about what that means in practical terms. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? What's the point of all of it? When I said earlier that I teach a course on anti-Black racism, I'm fully aware that this is a very touchy subject, and I make that very clear at the beginning. But I also say that the reason we have to talk about this is so that we all can do better and be better. Of course, I live very close to the United States, and so when the United States coughs, sometimes we catch a cold in Canada, and we are catching more than a cold right now, but how can we ensure that we are doing better in the way we are thinking about issues related to these things that we're seeing our southern neighbor doing a lot of? How can we, beyond saying, oh no, Canadians, we don't do that, how can we be different in practical terms? AI can't provide that answer. AI wasn't on the bus with you yesterday when you boarded and someone didn't stand up for a pregnant black woman to sit because they just didn't want to, and or they were occupying an extra seat. AI doesn't know that. So what practical ways could we be solving some of these issues? And I think if we infuse that into our assessments and we give, I think, now I'm on the side of the students, our students a bit more credit that they're capable of doing what we think the assessment should do in aligning with our courses, maybe then we could be on our way to actually showing how these are tools rather than ends in themselves. Because AI isn't an end. And no, ChatGPT isn't the only, I mean, it is one of, I don't know, thousands. I don't want to say millions because I'm trying to be measured, but it's one of many. I use a Samsung phone and Gemini is always wanting to tell me something. Well, I put it to the test. Cook me jollof rice. Show me how. That's not how I make mine. I mean, people swear by their mom's recipes and say this is the best one since sliced bread. And as many on this call will know, we're always having those conversations. I have a Ghanaian colleague, and the first thing I say to him is, get that Ghanaian jollof rice still isn't going to go anywhere. But again, we know from using these tools that AI itself has no capacity. It's crawling what we've put into it. It's kind of echoing back to us what we've put in. And that's why we all, I mean, I tell my students, we all need to be careful what we're feeding into it, because we're seeing now that for in terms of representation and inclusion, and I think Dr. Bosah mentioned that earlier, how can this be inclusive? Well, it depends on how we explain what inclusion even means. When we say originality, what does that mean in the original sense? Because believe it or not, your original research was because you went to the library, at least that's how I did mine, went to the library, read a few things, read some articles, and thought, they didn't do that. I could do that. So it's again in thinking outside that box. And we want to make sure that as instructors, as professors, as lecturers, that we do not restrict our students from the ability to think outside the box, because they need to provide the solutions to the world's problems. AI isn't going to fix all of the problems. There is fear that it's going to take their jobs. But what job, in fact, is it taking? I don't know that we're going to see a day when we have an AI. I hope we do not. We see an AI president really doing things. Hopefully, we don't get to that point, because that will be the end of it. I think some of us would just say, I'm out right now. Thank you.
I hope it doesn't get to that. No, not an AI president. But there are conversations that AI will be taking over some jobs. We'll still pick on it. There's the training aspect and the bias regarding artificial intelligence. But just before we go to Dr. Nenadi, in my department, when we had this conversation, and it was interesting that most of the questions that were raised about essays were particularly students of African descent. So that's also something I noticed. I noticed that, it's almost seemed like, well, this essay is just too good. Are you sure you're the one that wrote it? So one thing we did was to ask to include a 10-15 minute Viva assessment. The student then gets to explain their work in real time to demonstrate or to show genuine understanding as a form of compromise. Because listen, I could tell you we had that, it was, and the problem is, if they're able to show from previous work a great disparity from what has been done before and a recent submission, then that is how students are not using it well. But I think with the new assessment methods, we can move from final written product to show reasoning, to show argument, to show how students are making choices. Sometimes Dr. Nenadi mentioned a process-based, with his students. You're thinking about how it's helped you through a research journey, not the final essay. Ideation is one amazing thing we can use AI for. It helps you with the ideation process. It talks you through gaps in the draft, and then you go back. So it's all about the ethical use, not its replacing, but using it, in an ethical way. So we'll still look at that ethical, the question of originality. What does it mean? How can we actually preserve some form of originality? And another tutor in my university, instead of asking students to prepare or to submit an essay, they asked them to talk about how they used AI. So that was even amazing. Yes, they talked, explain your AI task. So what prompts? Everybody had a similar question, but the way they used the prompts were different. So the students had to document how they used the prompts, what changes they made, how they perceive those responses. And I thought that was, they identified errors, they critiqued the outputs, and then they were able to come up with, oh, so this is what I would then do differently. So these are some very different assessment models. But Dr. Nenadi, I really want to hear that those misconceptions, and then some of your thoughts with assessments.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about a few misconceptions that I have encountered And only because, again, I'm thinking of those who might be on the call who may not know. So I'm going to embarrass my friend again by talking about her. So she's got a decent position. She's head of something. I'm just going to keep it vague like that. In a charity, she works for an international organization back in Nigeria, but she's just recently started a PhD journey, and in passing, just in conversation, because I'm sort of mentoring her, um, I found that she had developed some very, very lazy habits around writing an email, passing it through AI um, to tidy it up and putting it back and sending. And I panicked because she's doing a PhD with a UK university where it is panic central for AI. And she's, like I said, she's quite clever, but because of the ease of use for tidying up her emails and her official communication, she had gotten into the habit of using it. And I said to her, we don't even question. We just see, has it been put in through a software? And so your first assessment will be a big fat fail if you even put it through just to tidy it up. So one of the misconceptions I would say people have, I'm owning it as an academic in the UK, is that AI is the devil. Never mind where students are using it to improve their grammar, highlight typos, or even just save time on structuring sentences and everything. And this is the African Forum, so you will know that one of our trauma reactions to colonialism is the need for perfection in communication. And we speak the best English, we have the best grammar. So that performance, that need to perform, means that we look at what we've written and somehow convince ourselves that it needs improving. Now, Dr. Motilola said, I can hear your voice. And that's actually true. When you write, like a guy I was mentoring doing his PhD, slightly just a few years behind me, so not that much mentoring there. But one word he used in his essay was posits. And I said, do you say posits when you're talking? Like, it's not part of your normal discourse, but it's that need to, he found it somewhere, wrote it down in an article that he'd read, and thought, I can use this when I'm writing so that I sound like those journals that I'm reading. So one of the misconceptions I would say, number one, is that on our side, we feel like anything, particularly based because we're in a UK university, the system will pick up any sort of usage, even if it's just basic grammatical tidying up as malpractice. But there's also the misconception on the side of the users where they think they're supposed to sound in a particular way. So AI is seen to be that improver that has been given to us to help us sound like we're supposed to sound. And for me, that's something that's quite worrying because people are easily caught up in that trap where they haven't really cheated. They've written the work themselves. And it's interesting because my friend and I did a course with the Harvard Kennedy School on the public leadership credential, and it was one of the induction process is to do a quiz about AI, and this is Harvard. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Harvard, right? I obviously failed the quiz because I was answering the question with my University of Bedfordshire mind. Everything was not allowed, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. Thinking, yeah, I'm the academic here, so I know. And I failed because Harvard allows you to use AI for thinking. It allows you to use AI for ideation. It allows you to use AI to even improve your writing. And here we are, failing people who have paid big money. So my friend would have been caught in that trap as an international student, paying big money for a prof doc, only because she's tidied up her ideas. So I think and I'm reflecting back on your question around integrity as well, I think it's the need to be more open in the discourse. And that's why this particular series is really important. we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to talk to our colleagues, our friends, our networks, our people who are thinking of academia, who are coming into academia. Keep the conversation going, because at the end, it boils down to us. We are people, generally speaking, of integrity, apart from those who will just copy and paste. And I know that they exist, and I know that they're more than 20%. But I'm optimistic. I say majority of people who come to academia come with an open mind, with a question that needs answering. But there is also the not knowing, and not knowing what standards are and what people are expected. And so that conversation to keep the integrity of our research and our ideas is talk about what's allowed and why, and what are you doing when you use it, and why are you doing what you're doing when you're doing it. And that helps to keep us on track.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh dear, to think that you answered all the questions, feeling like, and they feel, oh dear. Well, unfortunately, the UK, and that is the truth, they would put your thesis, your writing, whatever, they just smell a whiff of AI, boom, you're out sooner. But these are things that we're trying to change. We'll go into ethics and bias, but I'll just pause now and I'll just invite people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you for the comments you've put in so far. Talking about the best part is brainstorming without limits. Absolutely. Accessibility to research. Thank you. Working smarter, faster, wider research. And what worries you is misinformation. We've got AI assisted research that can increase speed of results. True. Opportunities offered. We've got the over-reliance on usage, which is con. And we've got the using it ethically, erosion of critical thinking. We started a bit of a conversation, a thread that I'd like to, just bring back. Given that most AI tools are trained on Western data, what are, because I would have really loved to see that picture. I wanted to restrain myself, because why would you put the people of color standing at the back? Like, I'm sorry, we have anyway, let's not go into analyzing and critiquing that today. But given that most AI tools are trained on Western data, what are some of the challenges for African context, for African writers, and how can African scholars ensure that, the diverse voices and realities are preserved? And these are some of the things that, worry us, because if we don't use it is the training model, and then if we use it we have an erosion of voices. But what are some of the challenges, and how can we ensure that our diverse voices are preserved and reflected going forward? Dr. Moti, would you like to go?
Of course, I would. Thank you very much. I think these are very important conversations that we need to not only keep going, keep having, beg your pardon, but we need to constantly be thinking about this, because it worries me a lot when I see, and of course I agree, students who have come from the continent many times are singled out. I personally find that offensive, because I ask someone else, when last did you use delve? Well, we say delve on the street. I know pursuit might not be the one we use, but we're always delving. Hello, we're delving. We keep delving. So live with it. We're delving. Just do whatever you're going to do with that. But I mean, beyond delving and all of the big words that we like to use, because again, believe it or not, many of us, I'm a millennial, we grew up learning. Am I a millennial? No, I've forgotten which one. But anyways, I am. Oh, because I'm not Gen Z, no. We grew up learning and having a dictionary as part of the books that we bought. Every single time my parents bought books, the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, what edition? Like that's how we used to think about the books, our collections. So when you have a book, you open it, you read it, right? You see words, you try to use it. You want to practice that. And that's how we learned. Again, colonialism did us what it did, because we now have to try to speak English better than the king, if we could. But beyond all of that, I think for Africans, it's for us to really be thinking about how we want to keep our stories authentic. Now, I haven't done this exercise I'm going to talk about, but I used to check for this when I worked at the University of Botswana. a single person from Botswana is called who is that? I'm Nigerian, also Canadian, but of course, someone from Botswana is referred to as what? You only needed to go on, and this is recorded. I shouldn't name universities. A top university in the UK, I think it's better that way. Who is supposed to admit students, and you're supposed to. There's a part where you select where you're from, and it had Botswanan in it. I know this is trended one time where it's is it Botswanan, Botswanese? It's Motswana. And I told my students in Botswana at the time, if you do not tell your stories, someone's gonna call you Botswanan when it's supposed to be Motswana. Right? I said, as a Nigerian, and I told them, I said, I know you think Nigerians are too much. We are always there. If someone called me Nigerianese, I'm gonna go there with my head on the floor thinking, how dare you? I am Nigerian. I'm already dealing with a lot. So do not try to change that identity. I think it's very important. And while that story I shared with my students, they said, what we gonna do? That's how they call us. Is because they don't know. And I said, they don't know. So what are you gonna do about it? I think I should have checked that university again to see if they've changed that and how many people know that when it's plural people from Botswana, it's Botswana. Now, these are very small things. Many of us, even from the African continent, do not know these nuances that exist within our continent because we're told that no, 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 you just need to fly to London. I mean, nothing wrong in flying to London, I should say in the same breath, but how much of our stories do we really know? How much of that do we appreciate and conserve? How much of that do we see as valuable? We talk about indigenous knowledge systems and we think about those as alternatives. Alternative to what? And why is it an alternative? Why do we think that it's not good enough? Whenever I'm teaching about critical issues in Africa, I say, when I was growing up, an older person could just look at you and say, the way you're looking, you don't have enough red blood cells in you. Grind ugu and milk and drink that 2 times a day. All your problems are solved. And true story, they will be solved. Whatever you do with that, do with it. But again, when we go here, we think, oh no, no, I need to go to my family doctor who runs all these tests on me and puts me on what and what, and then I have a reaction to that. Oh no, 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 it's not good for me. Why aren't we proud about our own authentic stories? No one's going to tell those stories for us. And if we dump our brains in AI thinking that AI is going to do the job for us, well, breaking news, AI is going to present a picture of you looking at someone you do not recognize because it wasn't created with you in mind. So let that sink in. It's for us now to step up and say, these are our stories. These are our ways of knowing and being. When you think about the concept of respect, when I teach about respect in my classes, my students do not understand why you cannot call people by their first names. And I said it will be over an African person's whatever for you to be born a day after them and think that you're just friends or that's your senior. They don't understand that concept. But what if we infused that a bit more to say, well, I appreciate that it's okay to call a 90-year-old Jones Jones. Nothing wrong with it. But in our context, we got to understand this. I had 16 students with me on a field school trip to Accra. And of course, we had to do those debrief sessions to say, you cannot just stretch your hands if that hasn't been stretched for to you. Well, they might do that, but know that it's not your place to say, oh, hi, wonderful to meet you. Well, it's wonderful to meet you too, but why is your hand stretched at me? We're not friends, we're not colleagues, and all of that. I think it's really for us and I'm putting us because I'm included in that as well, that we all, if we're thinking about this, we need to be thinking actively about the stories that we're putting forward about our continent. I like to show pictures of places. If you think about Lagos, there is the Morocco people, but there is also the Banana Republic. And now this places can exist side by side. When I was in Southern Africa, you just go to Johannesburg. You want to close your eyes while walking in some places because you see the wealth on one side and the squalor on the other side. Again, these things exist side by side. But to insist that the African continent is poor, it has disease, it's to miss the point. There is famine everywhere. We're dealing with wildfires in Canada. It's a real issue. Farmlands are going to be lost. Last year was Jasper in Alberta. These are real issues. Climate change is not just a problem of the African continent, it's a problem of everywhere. But we need to preserve our own stories. Chinua Achebe is a very important scholar. We don't want to wait for the hunter to tell these stories of how the hunt went. We must, as a matter of urgency, tell our own stories, because continuing to wait and depend on these tools to say this is how we're going to do it is going to take us further than we've even ever been. And we want to be thinking about those. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if it's a courage thing. Is it that maybe they're just scared, afraid? I honestly, it baffles me. I don't know, because the name is an example where people don't take out time to pronounce names properly, and this is me being nice, because we've had a conversation in school where if you can learn to say, was it not that you can learn to say any other name, you can learn to say, what's her name again, that other actress. But it's probably courage. And I've heard students in class and other people would say, give me a name I can pronounce. Oh, no. This is my name and that is it. So probably something to do with courage. But I did learn something new. I never knew that the Botswanans were called. I had no idea. So it's good to hear. So Dr. Nenadi, over to you.
Yeah, so yeah, I was called Edna. Someone looked at Nenadi and decided, no, that's too long, and they called me Edna. So that's the first one. I normally have different variations, at least but three syllables, but this person chose to paraphrase my name as Edna. And very recently, actually, so not long ago, just a couple of months ago. But I would say, standing on Motilola's ideas is something that I'm quite committed to, is just keeping our practices going and keeping our ways of life. And I know that we've had a very, very massive influx from Africa to the diaspora. We've had and so we worry about the migration of knowledge and how our indigenous knowledge is going to be diluted, because whether we like it or not, if you want to publish, if you want to be your voice to be heard, um, you have to speak in the way the publishers accept, and so we've applied for several grants that have been turned down, mostly I would say because of the direction of the knowledge that we're trying to raise. And but however, I think it's down to us to keep trying in whatever ways we can. I know that I, it somehow feels difficult for those of us from African origins. I wouldn't say black, because I think there are lots of initiatives where you see a lot of information being preserved, stories being told, histories being repeated, and things like that. But it's sort of, broadly speaking, what if you want your voice to be preserved, I think it boils down to you. A group of us are starting a collective for research around issues around northern Nigeria. So a few of us that have links to northern Nigeria are starting a research collective. We'll have our inaugural session in December. I will circulate to Dr. Genevieve to pass on to anyone who's interested once we get the documentation through. But the point is that it's down to us, and it's baby steps. It's one thing at a time. And for me, it's even in things like I've had all my children named here, proper at naming ceremony, and yeah, so it's that preservation of a culture, something as little as that. And it would have been easy to say, oh yeah, we're not back home, but we did it properly, the way we would have done it if we were in Kaduna. and my kids are going to the naming ceremony of their cousins and our friends and stuff, and so they're seeing it, and we're lucky that we have elders who've been here for a long time, and they're helping us repeat those traditions and keep those traditions going. And so I would say when it comes to AI, I see a future where our children will be part of the people contributing to the discourse. But in order for because it's what you feed in, you get out, isn't it? But in order for us to get out what's relevant to us, we need to make sure that our next generation know our story. So it's down to us to pass it on, to pass on our ways of knowing, our ways of research. And this is something I did. I put it on my LinkedIn. If you're interested, you can go and have a read. My daughter volunteered me to do a cookery session at her school. And you know, we don't take last as Nigerians. I even made ashwebi for the school children. So 15 children all wearing tie and dye, including their two teachers for that day while we cooked jollof rice. And it's only because, and I might get emotional here, but how will they know if we don't tell them? You know, my daughter may be contributing to discussions in the future. AI at the moment doesn't represent us. It doesn't mean that it will continue not to, but it has to be accurate. So we need to pass on what's accurate, pass on our stories so that when it's time, and we will get time, I believe strongly that we will, that the correct representation of who we are and what we stand for is what is fed into these systems that now generate information about us and help hopefully to guide a discourse in future.
Oh, thank you. And I must say, the Ashwebi was on point. I saw the pictures. Proper Ashwebi.
Oh yeah, I gave a plate to the head teacher. I sent my daughter to give a plate of the jollof to the head teacher saying, we need to be in the newsletter. So I'm waiting. And if he doesn't put us in the newsletter, he'll see my red eye.
No, but that is amazing. Like that, the truth is, yes, Nigeria doesn't carry last, but the fact that it was not just, oh, let's just do jollof rice. There was an immersion in culture. It was an experience. It was a memory that was unlocked and, preserved in their minds. And the pictures were just, you could see them. They looked really cute, the gown. I was like, okay, talk about going all out. And just like Professor Williams said, also well done. Thank you for representing. But just like Professor William put in the chat, Chinua Achebe reminds us that if we don't tell our own stories as African people, we'll disappear. And yes, by unproblematically accepting AI without giving consideration to who programs and therefore determines the parameters within which it operates, the outputs are received in the public will remain misrepresented. And this also applies to AI. If we don't question who builds the systems, if we don't shape how they're used in our universities and speak up, then our voices will risk being drowned out by somebody else's code. So this is also for those doing their PhD, coming to do their PhD. AI might be clever, but it doesn't know your own lived experience. It can wrestle with the ethics. It can't defend a thesis. So when you're sitting, when you're talking, speak from your experience, talk about the lived reality. And I know with the future of assessment, it's not just about catching students out, but it's also about understanding, demonstrating how you've learned, what you have learned, how you can highlight that. AI cannot replace human thoughts. It can't replace context. Context is important. It cannot replace your voice. So we'll land the ship here, but I want to ask our panelists, what's one practical way that I want participants here to engage responsibly with AI in their own work. One practical way, or if there's more than one, that would be great. And if you do have questions, put in the chat. We've got 8 minutes more to go. Yes, context is everything. Thank you. So we'll start with Dr. Moti. What's one practical way we can engage responsibly?
Thank you. That's very It's something to really think about and sit with. And as I speak here, I also realize, and many people are from the United Kingdom. No, of course, someone's just put a professor's put in the chat box. Context is everything. Know your context. And I'm so excited for the example you provided, Dr. Adamu, about doing that Harvard test and not doing so great at it because in North America, we have a different stance on it. It's not to say that we're throwing caution to the wind or that we're then saying, oh, you can present whatever work, it's going to fly. No, it isn't. AI does not know the references. I have had assessments where students have written an assignment on an African context. They were writing about Kenya. Unfortunately for them, my PhD supervisor, when I studied in the UK, is Kenyan, and I knew a thing or two about the Kenyan context by the end of that PhD as well. So I knew straight away that what they were writing about and the sources they were quoting did not exist. And I didn't need to go far, they didn't. So I would say in using AI, of course, know your context. As you know now, in the UK context, many of your universities say no. So be aware of what obtains wherever you are. In mine, it's not to use AI as replacement for original thought. If you want to refine it grammarly, I mean, I personally have no issues with someone trying to refine their grammar because it shows that they're thinking about how they're perceived. Of course, we don't want to do that to the point where we lose our voice in the process because again, you submit something that absolutely doesn't sound like you, not very great. But in the way we use this tool, I think we always want to think about it. That's my approach to it as a calculator. How are you using a calculator? What will the calculator do for you if you're not putting the right things into it? No AI can provide a well-written ethnography of journalists in Botswana, for instance, because how is it going to understand that? There are lots of nuances that get lost and that are lost when you use AI, especially in thinking about an African context and in thinking about our African stories and our knowledge systems and all of that. You want to really be thinking about what obtains for you, but also what you're trying to achieve with AI. So again, FYI, in the UK, do not put it in. Your professors have said it's not allowed. For us, I'm sure, even my colleagues, you'd read an email, you'd know that's not how you sound. That's an AI talking to me. Now I have to decide, do I want AI to talk back to him or do I want to speak back to him, human to AI? Because eventually that's what you're going to have. Machines are going to be speaking to themselves and no one's going to be speaking to anyone. You want to use it very much in a way that does not replace your critical thinking. That's what the world needs. That's what will set you apart. While those funding opportunities, Dr. Adamu, they still haven't smelled the coffee yet, don't worry, they're gonna smell it. In Canada, for instance, I mean, anything on Black health is a big deal because many Black people have lost their lives. So whether you're Black as defined as those who moved from the United States for 400 years ago to Canada, or Black person of African descent, as those of us who migrated recently, it's still a very hot subject. And so many of those research are being supported by proper funding. I think maybe the UK is not trying to play catch up. They would catch up eventually and realize that these are important issues, but do not, as I mean, this is an advice I would give to my PhD self when I started in 2011. Do not let anyone take away your voice. Your voice is what will set you apart. And even though you use a calculator to know that 4 plus 2 is 6, also know in your critical mind that 6 plus 0 is also 6, as is 1 plus 5, as is 10 minus 4, as is 16 minus 10, and know the possibilities that are always endless when you set yourself to critical thinking, in asking the why, in asking how. I think why more than anything. Why is this happening? Why am I thinking about this way? What more should I know? Why should I know this more? When you set yourself, up to do that, I think we'll be having fun. We'll be balling because we'll then know that these things are not just shaping, and they're not dictating the tune. We still dictate how we want to go. And great, I just want to have a shout out before I go. Great job with going all out with the Ashwebi. My daughter is just starting kindergarten. They better not invite me for a cookout because Nigerians don't carry last. I mean, and you see, this is mostly how I go to classes, weather permitting. I go in my Adire, in my Ankara. I want to have conversations. I want my students to know I am comfortable in wearing these things to show you that our culture is rich. There is nothing to be cowing in shame about. I've tied a gele, it's what we call it in Yoruba, a head tie, in my classes to explain what that looks like for us in thinking about identity. We are amazing. We're unique. We bring something very unique to the table. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. If the table is not available, build your own table. They're going to come join you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Exactly. They will come join you. Thank you. Dr. Nenadi.
Okay, so I think Dr. Muti has said it all, literally. But what I'm going to add is just one word, which is honesty. And I think if just my advice would be just be honest. Be honest when you're using AI. The way I have my own personal moral compass, or my own, is that my gauge is that when when I use it, I use ChatGPT a lot. But what am I using it for? So for example, yesterday someone asked me, oh, we're planning to do something, this thing, what do you think we can do? And I thought, I don't have time to plan, um to sit down and plan this ceremony that this person is planning. I just put it in, and it just generated the plan, and I forwarded it to the person. So I'm not, it's not, my honesty is I'm not passing that as my original idea or my original thought. What's the impact of what I've said? I'm not selling it for anything. I'm not using it to make money. So in your use, be honest. Are you representing your information and your knowledge, or are you trying to pretend to be who you're not? And that, hopefully, in addition to what Dr. Moti has said, should help us keep ourselves ethical and grounded as we use AI.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Honesty, absolutely. That is one way. One practical way I would say that we can continue to engage AI responsibly is use it as a thinking partner, not a ghostwriter. Don't copy and paste. It can help you brainstorm. It can help you organize your thoughts. It can help you see gaps. It can help with analysis, but keep your critical voice. Make sure your voice is there. Make sure it supports, not replacing. So don't copy and paste. And I see the question somebody has asked, what should researchers who are over relying on AI, what advice would we give to early career researchers who are over relying on AI to generate and humanize research papers? Sometimes they just copy and paste. What should they focus on instead to build real research skills? And this is really it, stay transparent. You also start small, stay transparent. You could summarize articles with it, but in terms of writing, make sure some of schools, and I see Jennifer put it, some schools ask that where you use AI, you document it, reference it, you can ask, how can I improve this? You can ask, what should I do to make it better? These are some ways to enhance. It keeps your critical thinking. But my first thing to students is don't copy and paste. Don't copy and paste. Don't copy and paste. That for me, that's it. Use it, but use it responsibly. Use it to process, think through. Use it even for peer review. Some courses we've done with crisis communication, we've asked it to create a scenario. There are things it cannot replace. It can't replace your creativity, your analysis, your argument, but we have used it to create scenarios. We will, thank you. We're just a minute over time, but we do want you to stay in touch. We have a community. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. There are quite a number of talks that we've done in the past, and we will be uploading this one as well, just so other people can find it. I like to say thank you, first of all, to the panelists today. I know it's super early in Calgary, but thank you for coming, Dr. Motilola Akinfemisoye-Adejare. God bless. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let me just say, I said God bless. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nenadi Adamu. Thank you. Last time it was 4 kids, now it's 6. Maybe next time it'll be 8. You know, they just keep increasing. If you just send us the address, we'll just plan and send all the kids to you. Thank you.
I'll be happy to have them.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that has stayed, participated, asked questions, listened in. And please subscribe to YouTube, and we'll upload this and share with people. Thank you so, so much. Oh, I'm glad that you really enjoy this. We look forward to having more. We'll have some more conversations on AI, some more conversations on research writing, literature review, but we also want to expand into more collaborative means. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And yes, we look forward to seeing you at some other time. All right. Thank you.